Hello, this is Mrs. Hawes. I'm one of the assistant principals here, and I'm excited to bring this lesson to you today. I was hoping to visit some classes, but alas, with the snowstorm, I decided to go digital, so this presentation will be flipped. Our focus today is on sketchnoting. And if you've ever seen sketchnoting before, sketchnoting is a way to kind of use pictures and words to help you understand what you read. Sketchnoting has become very popular for kids and adults because it helps you focus on comprehension, on understanding. And it's kind of a fun way for your brain to process what's going on. So today we have a couple different learning targets I want to share with you. Specifically, we have 3 that relate to our sketchnoting focus called GPS. And so you'll see that with our GPS, we have 3 parts, GPS. So our first learning target is to identify the genre, the G of a text, the genre. It sounds kind of fancy, French genre, but it just really means the kind of text. Secondly, we want to identify the author's purpose, the P in GPS. Why did the author choose to write this book? And then third, we want to summarize the text. And we're going to do that as we go along, and we're going to use that sketchnoting to help us summarize so we make sure we understand what's happening. But there's one really big learning target here, and this is kind of the overarching target. And basically, it's why we are doing sketchnoting. And I can organize my thinking to prepare to understand a text using this GPS. And of course, that's where we get in our sketchnoting over here, because we want to make sure that we are really thinking about what's happening in the text. And we're kind of organizing. I think oftentimes boys and girls jump right into a text and you just kind of start reading the first sentence. And the big idea I hope you get from our GPS strategy is whatever kind of text, you want to make sure that you're ready for it and you're thinking about it. So this is the why. When you're reading, I want you to really think about the fact that you're going to read different kind of text in different ways. For example, if I have a passage on an SOL test, I'm going to read it a certain way. If I have a recipe, I might really read it in a different way, right? And then likewise, whether my text happens to be nonfiction or fiction, I really need to stop and think about that kind of text to prepare to understand it. You're definitely going to read The Little Engine That Could in a very different way, hopefully, than a book like B. So we want to make sure that we're stopping to think about what kind of book it is before just jumping right in. Now, the GPS strategy that I'm going to teach you actually is a combination of probably 10 years actually of teaching and learning. My background, since you might not know, I used to be a reading specialist, and I was a reading specialist for 12 years at 5 different schools. And at those 5 schools, I worked with a whole bunch of kids, and predominantly one of my major goals was to get kids ready for this lovely SOL test. And I worked with a lot of students who were very strong and who needed very little help getting prepared, and I worked with other students who were really stressed about it. So our GPS strategy came out of those lessons to help kids feel less stressed and more confident. So I'm hoping you'll be able to use this GPS strategy not only for those district tests and the SOL, but we can also use it on Achieve. You can use it on your test in class. It's a way to kind of focus your thinking. So what is GPS? GPS is, of course, a navigational tool. You probably use GPS tools very often to help drive somewhere. We actually all use GPS on our phone lately. But a GPS tells you where you're going. And likewise, a GPS for a text tells you where you're going in a text. So you'll see my letters, my G, my P, and my S on my sketch notes. My GPS lets me know where to go. So we're going to dive into this tool, into this GPS. This orange big chart, I've made a copy and given it to your teacher. It's an anchor chart for you to be able to refer back to anytime you want to do a GPS. And I think it'll help you kind of understand a little bit about what you're expected to do. So we're ready to get started, and the best part of GPS is it doesn't need anything fancy. You just basically need a piece of scratch paper. And so in order to do this, you're going to take your piece of scratch paper and you're going to fold down the top 2 corners, just like that. And so then we can take our corners, you know, just fold it in. I usually leave a little space kind of in the center. And then I can label them with my G on the first one, my P, and my S. So why don't you take your paper and try that out, get your GPS ready. If you need to pause the video, feel free if you need a little more time. Again, we're just folding the top 2 corners. Okay, so now we're ready to start with that first corner, the G. And as I told you in our learning targets, the G stands for the genre, or kind of text, type of text that it is. There are all kinds of different text out there. Predominantly, we're going to kind of divide our GPS into like 3 different ideas, and it seems like there are 3 main forms of writing that we're going to see. I could also add poetry, but poetry kind of sometimes could be fiction and could be nonfiction. So let's first talk about the genres of fiction. When we talk fiction, probably the genre that we see, the type of text that we see most often is this realistic fiction. Those are the things that really happen, but maybe didn't actually happen. But it's real characters, plausible storylines. It could really happen. Maybe someone lost their balls, someone's heading to the movies or something. Then we have fantasy, and fantasy are those ones that couldn't really happen. That's when we have like animals talking and different things like that. A lot of fun fantasy, Harry Potter, all of those kind of ideas. We also have historical fiction, and that's something that didn't really happen but did use some actual characters from history. Science fiction novels are, they have some science, some real facts in them, but it's still a make-believe story. A fable is one of those stories with an animal that teaches a lesson. We like those fables. Or myths. There's all kinds of genres within fiction. We also have nonfiction. And so for nonfiction, there are a lot of different types of nonfiction text that you're going to run into. A biography is a story of somebody's life. An autobiography is a story about somebody's life told by them. Auto, it's told by themselves. Informational text, or anything from a textbook to my story of the bee back here, is an informational book. Maybe it's a sequential book, steps to how to do something, or even a reference book would be considered a nonfiction book. So stop and think of what kind of text. We also will see, like maybe on an SOL test or a district test, functional text. And functional texts are texts that are used for a specific purpose. Maybe a recipe, instructions for something, a flyer, or maybe even an ad for a blood drive or something like that, or map to go somewhere, or even a cafeteria menu or something like that. Those are functional text. So we always stop and think of what kind of text. Now, in order to do this, you got to kind of preview the text a little bit. So for today, we're going to use this text, How Did Lilia Feel About Visiting Her Grandmother? Is the name of the text. And we're just going to kind of preview it one time, the very first paragraph of it, just to kind of see, what do you think the genre is? So don't forget, we're looking for fiction, nonfiction, functional. I'm already kind of thinking it doesn't look functional. It looks more like actual prose. It looks like a paragraph. So functional seems like it's out. So we got to figure out if it's fiction or nonfiction. So listen for those clues. Lilia tried hard to keep the tears from filling her large brown eyes. She felt like a heavy lump was in her chest. School was out and all of her friends were happily planning swimming lessons and family vacations. Lilia's mother had just told her she'd have to go far away to spend the summer at grandmother's. Lilia loved grandmother, but she would be lonely without her family and friends in the neighborhood. As I'm thinking fiction or nonfiction, I do see a character. I'm not seeing any specific details about a year or somebody famous. So I'm not thinking it's a biography of a famous person. It's just this girl named Lilia with her grandmother. So I'm really thinking this is probably going to be fiction. When I look at it, when I kind of think back to what kind of fiction is, we got to kind of come back to our poster and look at some of our choices of what kind of fiction. So let's see. Realistic, fantasy, historical, science, fable, or myth. I'm really thinking that this looks like realistic fiction because there could be a girl named Lilia and she could have to go to spend the summer with her grandmother. So I'm going to go ahead and start my GPS. Since I've already done this thinking, the Sketchnoting, I'm going to start to get it down. So I'm going to add in G for genre. You don't even need to write the whole word out, just G. And then realistic fiction. So this is going to be a realistic fiction story. So it's going to be real characters that have real problems that will hopefully be solved. So if you need to pause while you're getting your GPS done, feel free. Again, we don't need to write a lot out, just G in realistic fiction. And I see that word real hiding in there, so make sure you spell that one right. Realistic fiction. Really could happen. Okay, so let's move on to GP. Purpose. Why did the author write this story about Lilia? Now, when we think back to fiction, we look back at our poster, when we talk about a fiction story, there's fiction really have two purposes why fiction's written. First is to entertain. Usually it's like to tell something funny. We want to have people entertained. They like what they're watching, they're listening to or reading. But usually by 3rd, 4th grade, SOL test and different stuff, the level of text that they're going to give us, it's more than just to tell you something fun. There's usually a lesson or theme that they're sharing. And so you're trying to learn from how the character acts, or how the character is dealing with a problem, or how the character is interacting with other characters, to learn like a lesson for you personally of how you would act in the real world. So when we think back to Lilia here, our purpose, we can just go ahead and write fiction. I think it might be to entertain. We're not sure yet, but it's more for a lesson. And since that's the case, I'm going to take my fold and I'm going to come down here to the bottom and I'm going to fold the bottom corner because I want to be on the lookout. I want to be looking out for a theme. Now don't forget, the theme is this lesson that's learned by the characters, and then, of course, hopefully the lesson that us as the readers will learn. So we've gotten our GPS started, we've already done our G, we've done our P, so now we're ready to go on to our S. If you still are writing yours, feel free to pause the video. If not, let's continue on. So now we're ready for our summary. And I started to get my GPS kind of organized here. Summary, I could use the whole space because I've written on the front flaps really. But I've divided out, and if you notice, I've just drew a couple lines across the page. When I looked at the Lilia text, it actually had 6 paragraphs. So this stands for paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, paragraph 5, and paragraph 6. So I've kind of gotten my page ready to go, as it were. If the text happens to be longer than that, I could always flip over my entire GPS and work in the back. That wouldn't be a problem. I've had some kids who've done a GPS on the front and the back and used another sheet of paper if you really wanted to do that, if it's a long text. Sometimes you'll also find that the paragraphs are super short, and instead of having to write each paragraph as its own little section, maybe you want to divide up the text of paragraphs 1 through 3 together, 4 through 6, or something like that. So be thinking about that, but we're going to kind of divide up our notes so that we can kind of stay organized as we sketch. So let's go on to the very first paragraph again. Now remember we previewed it before, but we are going to go back and read it again. I think this is the most underused strategy of all, rereading. Most of these tests, the benchmark test, SOLs, are not timed, guys. There is really no reason that you should only read the text one time. You are definitely going to understand it better and definitely score better if you've read it more than one time. I read things multiple times. So preview that text the first time, but then now when we're getting ready to do our sketchnoting, take your time to stop and really reread this paragraph. So I'm going to reread it to you, and if you could follow along as we go. Lilia tried hard to keep the tears from filling her large brown eyes. She felt like a heavy lump was in her chest. So I can start drawing right now. Now here's the cool thing. When I talk about GPS, I really want to come back to, since it's a fiction story, what are the key things that I'm looking for? Hopefully you have seen this before. It's called a Shape Go map. It's basically a way to understand fiction text through pictures. And if you notice, it's got 3 shapes, 1, 2, 3, because you have a beginning, middle, end of a story. So here at the beginning of the story, we have a triangle. At the middle, you have a square. At the bottom, you have a circle. So let's go up here to the beginning. If you notice, the beginning of the story really always has 3 key elements that you should be looking for. It always has some characters, it has a setting, and tells you a problem. In the middle of the story, you have a bunch of other events that are key. And in the middle of the story, you really want to focus on remembering those in order. This happened first, next, keep going. But at the end, the way fiction stories are always written, there's always a solution. There's some way that this problem is fixed. So as a reader, when we're looking for those key elements for our GPS, we really want to be focused on making sure we're looking for these elements. We're going to kind of blend that into our sketchnoting so that we know here, first paragraph, we're going to be at the beginning. So I'm going to start on mine, and I've kind of gone ahead and just even given a little triangle next to paragraph 1 because I want to add that. So I already heard a character. Hopefully you did too. So sketchnoting doesn't have to be fancy. I'm going to tell you quite honestly that I am an assistant principal and a lover of reading, but not an artist. So just kind of sketch it out. It doesn't have to be fast. So here I've drawn Lilia with the big tears filling her eyes. Nothing fancy. We have a character, so I wrote a little check over here on my triangle that I got my character. But I'm starting to also see a little bit of problem. Why is she crying? So let's come back to the text. School was out, and all of her friends were happily planning swimming lessons and family vacations. Lilia's mother had just told her she'd have to go far away to spend the summer at grandmother's. Lilia loved grandmother, but she would be lonely without her family and friends in the neighborhood. So I have a couple other characters. Hopefully you saw it started with school was out. So we have our little school building. And I'm going to kind of draw the school building with a little flag on top of it. And I'm going to say, I'm going to label it, school is out. This is important because this starts to really hint at what our setting is. It has to be summertime, right? Because school is out in the summer. And for the summer, we heard that Lilia's mom told her that Lilia was going to have to go to grandma's, right? And so I'm thinking that maybe she's not so happy about going to grandma since she's got these tears in her eyes. So I've kind of just sketchnoted it out. We got Lilia crying. School is out because it's summer. And Lily is going to have to go to G's house, grandma's. Notice how in sketchnoting you don't have to write everything out. Keep it simple, keep it focused. Feel free to add a little more to your illustration, but keep it simple. So now we're on to paragraph 2. So of course we're going to come down here to the second paragraph as we go along. Okay, let's listen to some of it. I tend to find that I'll read about a sentence or two and then stop and do a little bit of a drawing. So let's try that. Lilia's mother put her arms around Lilia and brushed back her long dark hair. We already have another character. Hopefully you saw that. So if we have Lilia, she's sitting there. She's got her long hair. And we have Lilia's mom. And Lilia's mom is taking her arm and she's brushing back her hair. So maybe she seems like she's trying to comfort her, right? So doesn't need to be anything fancy. We definitely have some characters. We got Lilia, we got her mom, and she's brushing back her hair. Now notice Lilia's mom, I kind of drew a smiley face. She seems like she's helping, but I drew a sad face on Lilia. Because if she's crying, she probably doesn't need to be smiling, right? I should probably switch that back in paragraph 1 too, because she was crying. So make sure, like little details like that really show that you're stopping to think about it. Okay, so let's go back to the text. Mrs. McGill had been sick and needed a great deal of rest this summer. Hold on. Who's Mrs. McGill? Before I draw her, I gotta think. Mrs. McGill had been sick and needed a great deal of rest this summer. Who's Mrs. McGill? Grandmother would take good care of Lilia, and she'd come home at the end of summer. Everything would be better then. Lilia sniffed and nodded. She knew her mother was right, but she was still sad. So far, we have Lilia and her mom. But then they talk about Mrs. McGill. She had been sick and needed to rest during the summer. I'm kind of thinking, is this another person? But they don't talk about any. It doesn't say Mrs. McGill, the neighbor. I don't have any clue like that. So far, I just have Lilia and her mom. Ooh, I'm starting to think, what if her mom was Mrs. McGill? Mrs. McGill had been sick. If she's the one that's sick, she needs to rest and can't take care of Lilia, so she'd have to go to grandmother's. Does that make some sense? I think so. See how we're really processing text, or really stopping to think about it, not just going on and reading the text. So I'm going to add Mrs. McGill is mom, and I'm going to put her in bed. And since she's in bed, then Lilia, where's Lilia going to have to be? She's going to have to go to grandma's, right? So we can kind of see a little bit of the illustration. Doesn't need to be fancy. Lilia sad. Mrs. McGill had been sick, so she's going to have to go to grandma's. Everything would be better at the end of summer. Lilia sniffed and nodded. She knew that her mother was right. So it seems like so far we really do understand the characters. We have the setting. First, they're at Lilia's house, then they're going to grandma's house, or then Lilia's going to grandma's house, and we have the problem. Notice, do we have all three key elements of a fiction story? Characters, setting, and problem. I hope you're getting it. We're heading on to paragraph 3. Remember, with our Shape Go map, we have a beginning, middle, and end of the story. Knowing that this is 6 paragraphs, we're probably towards the middle. So right now we're just going to try and remember some events in order as we're going along. Since we know our characters, what's happening with them. So, on the day she arrived, Lilia tried to find something wrong at grandmother's house, but she couldn't. If you stop to draw, think of what that's going to look like. Lilia's at grandma's house. We have a specific setting. She's trying to find something wrong. But now they're going to describe grandma's house. It had flowers, trees, and a white fence. Grandmother baked bread and cooked the same kind of food that Lilia's grandmother made at home. Grandmother even smiled and told her, "I'm so glad you've come, Lilia." So I did a little illustration here. Let's see. Lilia had headed to grandma's. Grandma's house was nice. It had flowers and trees and a fence. And grandma, she was baking bread and making food, and she was so glad. Look at that grandma smiling. But Lilia still, not feeling it, is she? See how sketchnoting can be fun? Feel free to add some details to the illustration, but don't take too long. We don't want to get exhausted by doing too many drawings. We just want enough that we're really able to process and think in our head. Okay, so we're moving on to paragraph 4. I've actually left the text for 4 and 5 because I want you to start trying it a little more on your own. So instead of stopping at each paragraph, we're going to stop in a little chunk. So start with paragraph 4. Grandmother showed Lilia her pet bird, Bitsy, and the dog, Charlie. Bitsy chirped at her, and Charlie brought his ball for Lilia to throw. Stop and try it on your own. What details are you going to add? I see that we definitely have Lilia. Should be drawing her. There's a pet bird, a dog. You could even label them with their names. Sketchnoting usually uses some pictures and some words. And then what's actually starting to happen? Lily is going to throw the ball. Think of how you're drawing Lilia's face too. At this point, if she's playing with a dog, do you still think she has that big frown, or do you think things might be changing? Try it on your own. If you need more time to draw, hit pause. If not, let's go into paragraph 5. That afternoon, Lilia saw some children next door. More characters, right? She asked her grandmother about them. Grandmother said, "Oh, that's Sally and her brother Sid. They are twins, and they are the same age as you. I know you'll get along and play together. Their mother and I have lots of things planned for the 3 of you." Stop and think, what are we going to draw? So we have children next door. We could even label them, right? We have their names Sally and Sid, who are twins. They're even the same age. I know one of her problems before was that she didn't want to leave her friends, so maybe she could make some new friends. Ooh, and they're going to play together. The mother and them have lots of things planned. Try it on your own. What details are you going to add? Feel free to come back and look at the text for some other text proof as well. I'm going to kind of show you a little bit if you're looking for some ideas of things that I drew. When we look at paragraph 4, we have Grandma, and Grandma has a bird and a dog, right? And Lily is playing ball. Got those details. How about paragraph 5? Lilia is looking next door at 2 kids live in the house next door. And together, that's why I did a circle together, they are to have plans and they're going to play together. You might have illustrated in a different way, just as long as you're really thinking about what's happening and you're really thinking about how Lily is starting to feel. I don't know if we should maybe even start to draw that face a little bit differently. So we're ready for the last paragraph. It starts off with Lilia smiled. Ooh, that gives us a real specific information about how to draw her face. Lilia smiled. She would miss her family and friends back home, but this might be a good summer after all. Not a lot to draw. Keep it simple. Lilia smiled. She's at Grandma's, right? Now she's still thinking about home, but she's smiling here at Grandma's. Things have definitely changed. So take a moment, look down at your GPS. I hope you realize that sketchnoting should be fun. Lots of people like to draw. Whether you're good at it, not as good like me, it doesn't really matter. But by drawing, you really had to stop and think about the text. You can take a minute and preview back and look exactly at what happened in the text right now, and you have a pretty good idea. Now, I venture a guess that when you're typically doing a district test or an Achieve article, you probably don't put this much time into really reading the text and thinking about it. This is what good readers really should be doing, and that's why we invented the GPS strategy. It's because we want to really make it very visual what's supposed to be happening up here in your head. And I bet you kind of already started to think of several questions that are on district test. You're ready to answer what kind of text this is. You're ready to read about the purpose. You're ready to tell specific events that happen with the character setting problem. I bet you're also ready to even think of that theme, right? Were you on the lookout for a theme? I'm thinking that Lilia definitely learned a lesson, that even though she was sad, that things kind of sometimes work out for the better, right? So I'm going to add a little theme in mine. Sometimes things work out. And they maybe even work out differently than what you expected, right? So I think the author probably was, in fact, entertaining us with a story, but I think we did learn a lesson from this little girl about how her life changed when she moved for the summer, but she still was really pretty happy. So I'm hoping this GPS, you're ready to really see the power of the GPS. So here I've given you a sample question. What I want you to understand is if you put this much thinking into really reading, the question part is easy. What I see a lot of times are boys and girls who spend a whole lot of time on the questions and not as much time on the reading, and it's backwards. This is a reading test. So I really want you to use that GPS to get that reading and that thinking happening. But I want to show you how fast and easy the questions are after you've put this much work. First of all, you've got your notes to go back to at any time. You also have the text to go back to at any time. So let's start. In this story, Lilia felt. Oh, didn't we spend a lot of time really drawing her face and thinking about her feelings? Was she sad and then happy? Well, when I look at my GPS, she's got some sad faces and happy at the end. I'd say that's a maybe. How about, is she sad all through the story? I can definitely get rid of that one because my picture for paragraph 6 definitely had her smiling. It even said the words, Lilia smiled, text proof. So I can slash the trash. Was she happy and then disappointed? Likewise, I can slash the trash on that one because she was definitely happy at the end. She was smiling, not disappointed. That would be sad. Or was she happy all through the story? No, if I look back at that first kind of picture, first paragraph, she had tears from her face. I'm not thinking she was happy the whole way. So I know my answer, of course, is going to be F. How about, let's try another one. This story is written to show. So what are they showing? I'm already kind of thinking maybe a theme, little author's purpose. Children have a hard time when their parents are sick. Stop and think. We did have some text proof of Mrs. McGill being sick, so it was hard for her. I gotta give it a maybe, right? I love using the maybes and elimination. That helps me out. Things often work out better than you think at first. Didn't we kind of have some proof of that one too? That things worked out for her? Different than she thought at first because she was crying at the beginning. I got another maybe. How about, a child can never be happy away from home for the summer? Never be happy. Well, I know in paragraph 6, we drew her, look at your picture, we drew her with a smile, and the text proof said Lilia smiled. She was happy at the end, so nope. Grandmothers are not as much fun as mothers. Well, okay, this is, I don't know, what text proof do we have of it? We go back into the text. I see Grandma baking bread. I see Grandma, she has dogs and pets, and she's glad that she's there. There are other kids to play with. Did they have anything about Grandma not being fun? Did we have any text proof of that? I don't think so. We got to slash that trash. So we have 2 maybes to choose from. So I want you to really think about what we drew and what we thought about. Was this whole story really about her having a hard time because her mom was sick, or was it more about things working out? When I look at it, paragraph 1 and 2 on my GPS, she's having a hard time that she's sick, but all the other paragraphs, it seems like things are working out. I mean, she's got to go other places with other kids and different things, and she's even smiling. And we kind of, when we said the theme, we talked about things working out. So I think this is the best answer. So I'm hoping this really shows you that if you spend the time thinking, reading, read it twice, you do your GPS, that you'll really be able to understand a text much better. So in closing, my GPS is a way to navigate text. It's a way to stay on track. Today's lesson was all about a fiction side. Now, of course, you would draw your summary very different if it happened to be a non-fiction text, because you're going to have to do your organizing in a different way. Future lessons will kind of focus on some of these non-fiction ways. This would be a great thing to use for Achieve. I can tell you that I've got data that really supports that GPS works. The schools that I've worked at, most students that do the GPS really score very well. We've even seen on Achieve that students score way above that 75% when they take time to really process and think about text. So, how do we do with our learning targets? Hopefully now you know a lot more about genre or kind of text. I hope you really are thinking that it's important to think of the author's purpose. Why do they write it as you read it, not just when it's a question. And I hope you used our sketchnoting today to help you summarize. And then, of course, our final. I can organize my thinking to prepare to understand a text using GPS. Make sure you're organizing. That's what GPS is all about. And it's all about the thinking. Think of how you did on your learning targets. I hope you use this GPS. If you want to grab me in the hallway and tell me about how you've used it and how it's helped you, I'd love to hear some stories. Thanks, guys. Happy reading.